Hi, good morning. My name is Sarah, and I will be doing a kindergarten literacy lesson. My lesson is going to be about how to solve a tricky word by looking at the picture. So, according to chapter 14, decoding or the ability to figure out what written symbols represent is a skill that kindergartners are expected to learn and know. So I will be showing students how they can use the picture to help them solve a tricky word. So I'm going to first call students to the rug, and after they sit down, I'm going to start my activating prior knowledge by asking the students. So students, we've been learning different superpowers, different reading superpowers, powers that help us learn how to read books. Who can remind us some powers we learned? And as students are raising their hands and answering, I'll be complimenting them, and then I will respond by saying, so far we learned two superpowers. We learned pointing power, which means we are able to point to under each word as we read. And we learned our sight word powers, which means that we are able to read the sight words that we learned in a snap and quickly. And according to chapter 14, kindergarten students are expected to read some high frequency words or sight words. So I'm going to tell them today I want to show you that we can use the picture to help us solve a tricky word. And this superpower is called picture power. So when we get stuck on a word and we don't know what it says, we can look at the picture to help us. So then I'm going to demonstrate. So I have a book right here. This book I'm going to be doing my modeling with. It's called The Park. And I'm going to have the smart board connected to the document camera. So when I display this under the document camera, the students will be able to see my modeling of this book. So I'm going to tell students I want you to watch how I use picture power when I get stuck on a tricky word. So I'm going to turn to this page right here. These two pages will be displayed under the document camera. Oh, I noticed that I see some sight words I know, so I could use my sight word power as I am pointing to under each word and reading. And these will be sight words that the students are familiar with and that we went over. I can see the I don't know what this word is, but I'm not going to give up. I know that I can use my picture power to help me. So let me look at the picture. I see that this is grass. So I think this word might be grass. Let me unpeel my sticky note and let me read it and make sure that it makes sense and sounds right. I can see the grass. That made sense, and that sounds right. Does it look right? It does look right because grass starts with the letter G. And at this point as well, chapter 14 states that students are expected to know kindergartners are expected to know all 26 letters of the alphabet or most at least, and their corresponding sounds. So what I just did was modeling and demonstrating, which is mentioned in chapter 9 as an effective teaching strategy. And by me modeling and demonstrating, I'm showing students how to use their picture powers, what questions are they supposed to be asking, and just the language that they're supposed to be using. So that's something mentioned in chapter 9. So for the guided practice, I'm going to turn to another page, and I'm going to ask the students to read it with me. Let's read together, friends. I can see then I'm going to stop them. Here's a tricky word. Are we going to give up? And when students say, no, we're not going to give up, I'm going to ask the students, well, what superpower are we going to use to help us? What can we do? So this is questioning, which is another effective teaching strategy mentioned in chapter 9. And this will help them recall what was taught and help them remember what they should do if they're stuck on a tricky word. So when we get to this point, I'm going to ask students to turn and talk to their partner and figure out what this word was. And that's co-constructing, meaning that they are working together to solve a problem, as mentioned in chapter 9. And by me asking them to figure out what this word is, I'm creating a problem. And when you create a problem, it helps and add a challenge for them to solve. It helps create mastery in using the strategy, as mentioned in our textbook, chapter 9. So I'm going to be walking around listening to what students are saying, and then I'm going to bring them back. They're going to tell me what the word is. I'm going to unpeel the sticky note. We're going to read it together and make sure that it makes sense and sounds right. I'll ask them, how do we know that it looks right? How do we know it says flowers? And then they will tell me, because we see that it starts with the letter F, and we hear that in the beginning of the word flowers. So after this, I will be sending students back to their seats for independent reading. So they will be reading the books from their book baggies, and this will happen for about 15 minutes. So during this 15 minutes, I will conduct my first type of documentation, which is this conferring chart. So I will go to each table, the student's name will be here, the date will be on the top, and then the skill I'm going to be watching them do with their independent reading books will be picture power. So I'm going to be watching how they are solving tricky words using the pictures. Are they able to apply the skill to their own books? It's important for them to be able to apply this skill in their independent reading book, because they're taking these books home and practicing with these books. So if they're not able to do this at home or with their own books, that means that they probably will struggle at home. And this will help tell me, should I send home resources? Or maybe I need to do some one-on-one or small group with the student. And so if they are able to solve tricky words, I'll be writing that down. If they're not, I'll also document that, and then I could use that time to kind of scaffold the students. So I'm going to ask them, well, what do you see in the picture? What do you notice? What do you think would make sense? So Chapter 9 states that scaffolding using cues, hints, and questions, these are all things that can help a child apply a new skill. So I will be using that time to scaffold as well for students that need it. I don't expect that I will be able to get to everyone, so this type of documentation might take 2 days. And also I feel like it should take 2 days because sometimes in kindergarten, one day they are able to apply the skill, the next day they might struggle. So this is something that needs to be kind of documented over time. So after 15 minutes are over, I'm going to tell students that we're going to move into the second part of reading workshop, which is now they have the option to independently read either their sight word cards, their alphabet chart, their sight words, or they can read their shared reading notebook. These are poems that they take home and they work with, so they can read that, or they can read some emergent storybooks, which I will place in a bin at their table. So these are books that they're just reading for enjoyment, and those are like storybooks like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Mrs. Wishy-Washy, and books like that. So while students are doing that quietly, I'm going to do my second portion, which is kind of like a running record. So I'm going to be calling individual students, and I'm going to remind them of this book we just read. I'm going to read the first 2 pages with them, and then after that, I'm going to have them read the rest of this book on their own. So the rest of the book, they'll be reading it on their own. And then I'm going to be watching if they're using the pictures to solve tricky words. So I'm going to be checking off what they're reading correctly, if they said a word wrong, I'm going to document that. And then when they are done reading, I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to be like, so for example, if a student got a word wrong, I'm going to ask them, well, why did you said this? Why do you think that this was the word? So I'm kind of going to be getting an idea on their thought process. What were they thinking when they were solving this tricky word? And this will allow me to ask the appropriate scaffolding questions and allow them to correct themselves and try to fix the word they got wrong on their own. And of course, they will be complimented on words that they got correctly. So this again is, I'm probably not going to get to everyone in a day. Might have to take either 2 periods or 2 days, but seeing how students can read a book that they're not familiar with on their own will allow me to figure out how to group them in small groups or a guided reading group perhaps where I could go over the skill with them if they are having a hard time. So those are my documentation tools, and then I will call, after the period is over, students will be called back to the rug where we're going to have a share out where we go over what we just learned, and I'll have some students share tricky words they solved. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to your feedback.